I'm Charlie Haffey, and this is a quick look at the table of difficulty. We, on the Form Responses tab that I renamed Student Data, we could simply click on a row and we could follow a student's performance on the test all the way across and maybe gain some insight into the weaknesses and the strengths for a given student. Now we're going to be taking a look at the weaknesses and the strength of the test. How did the test perform? And in front of us, we have the answer key. And let me just scroll down here a little bit, get that up to the top. Below the answer key, we have the item analysis table. And this gives us a very in-depth look at how the test performed. There is an easier way to get the big picture, and that would be the table of difficulty. But there is the simplest and most convenient and most commonly used tool to look at how a test performed, and that is calculating the class average. So over here I have the class average. I put this table in ahead of time to spare you the trauma of watching me set this up. So I'm just going to go equals average, and I'm going to put in an open parentheses, and I am going to just select this row of data, enter, and what we have here is a result of 0.78 or 78%. So the tests, each test, the score correct on all those was averaged out to 78%. Now, the key here is if I had this test from previous years, I could compare that class average and see if there was an increase or decrease. But in this case, I have a real advantage. This test was given to 7 classrooms at roughly the same time. 132 students took this. So what I'm going to do now is put the system average right next to the class average. So I'm going to click this cell here and put an equal sign in. Come back to student data. And down here, I calculated the class average for the 132 students who took this test. So I'm going to click on that, hit enter, and I can see that the class average for this test was 78%, and the system average, including these students, was 73%. Now, what you could do is go in and look at the class average, and then look at the system average minus these students, and then you can look at how these students did to all the other students who were not in this class. There are just different ways of looking at it. We can go a step further, and we can take a look at the questions that fell into that hard, the moderate, and the easy categories. And while we did conditional formatting before, so we can take a look, now we're going to specifically count those questions. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to just scroll this over like that, so I get that right in the middle. And I have this table set up, and I just moved it up here to be under the class averages. We have hard, and we said hard was any question where the students had a correct response rate of 65% or less, and then moderate, and then easy was the correct response percent was 85% or up. So what we're going to do is count those questions. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to start off with a count if formula. We've used these before. So equals count if, and I'll go right here. And if you get this, it toggles back and forth. If you want that help menu, just come up here and click on this little question mark. And it says, what's your range? All right. And the range, I've done this before. I know it by memory here. I could just scroll over, and I'm going to grab that range, all right, and comma. So what's the criterion going to be? I'm going to enter this data, and it has to be in quotes because I'm going to be using text, okay? So I'm going to say that anything that is less than or equal to 0.65, and I have to close this in quotes, right? So it's going to count anything that is less than or equal to 65 on that row of answer key. Hit enter. And I had 5 hard questions. So 5 questions had a successful student answer 65% of the time or less. I come down here to the easy, And I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So equals count if, and the range. I could type this in. I really prefer to use the keyboard and the trackpad. So comma, and this time quotes, because we're using text, quotes, greater than or equal to 0.85, quotes, enter. So now I have 7 questions that are in the easy category. I'm now going to show you the simplest way of calculating the moderates, and this is pretty straightforward. There are other ways you can do it with formulas. I think this is just a pretty good way of doing it. So what I'm going to do is click on this cell here, and I'm going to put in a very simple calculation. So equals, and I want to have the count of the class. I could just enter 20. I much rather use cell references when possible. So I have equal to 20. I'm going to subtract the numbers for the hard and the easy. Okay, so I'm going to subtract. I'm going to put these next items in parentheses. So I'm going to click on that cell there, and I'm going to add to that this cell up here, and I'm going to hit enter. And this works out nicely. So let's take a look at that again. I have F24, which is the count, minus the sum of the hard questions and the easy questions. So I want to take the moderate is basically everybody who took the test minus the hard and the easy. And that worked out nicely. So I have 5 questions that are in the hard category, 8 that are in the moderate, and 7 that are in the easy. And this gives me a pretty good idea that in general, I thought the test performed well. We could really go into a lot of detail with this looking at the item analysis, but in a general way, I'm pretty pleased with this. This looks pretty good. I looked at the class average compared to the system average, and then I looked at the table of difficulty. And that, coupled with the item analysis, gives me a very clear picture on how this test performed.